Hey there, and welcome. Today, we are diving into one of the most incredible, most fundamental processes in all of biology, reproduction. I mean, think about it. It's the engine that drives evolution. It's why our planet is buzzing with so much diversity, and it's the simple yet profound way that life, well, makes more life. So let's just jump right in with a little thought experiment. Imagine for a second a world where, just overnight, every single living thing, from the smallest amoeba to the biggest whale, just lost its ability to reproduce. What would happen? What would that silence really mean for the future?
Well, the answer is pretty stark. Without reproduction, every single species would basically be on a timer, a countdown to going extinct. It is the one biological process that guarantees life keeps going, from one generation to the next.
And this gets to the very heart of it. The whole point of reproduction isn't really about the survival of one single animal. It's about the survival of the entire species. So how in the world do animals pull off this monumental task? Well, it turns out nature is pretty creative. There isn't just one way to do it. Across the whole animal kingdom, two main strategies have evolved, each with its own unique approach to making new life.
So on one side, you've got sexual reproduction. This is the one that involves two parents and a mashup of specialized cells. And on the other side, you got asexual reproduction, where a single parent can create offspring all by itself. Two totally different paths, but they both lead to the same destination, new life. Let's dive into that first playbook, the one we're probably most familiar with, sexual reproduction. It's this incredibly complex and intricate biological dance, and it always begins with two very special cells.
On one side, you have the male gamete, which is the sperm, and on the other, the female gamete, the ovum or egg. The best way to think about them is like two halves of a genetic puzzle. On their own, they're just single cells, but when they come together, they hold the entire complete blueprint for a brand new individual.
And the whole process kicks off with one absolutely critical event, fertilization. This is that single decisive moment where the genetic information from two parents finally merges, as one sperm cell fuses with an ovum. That fusion creates a single, incredibly powerful new cell called a zygote. And get this, from this one tiny cell, which now holds a totally unique set of instructions from both parents, an entire organism is going to develop. It's literally the first chapter in a new life story.
Now, this big meeting of the cells doesn't always happen in the same kind of place. For a lot of land animals, like us, cows, hens, it all happens safely inside the female's body. We call that internal fertilization. But for lots of animals that live in the water, like frogs and fish, it happens out in the open, in the water itself, and that's called external fertilization.
And this difference in location leads to a really fascinating question, a real strategic puzzle. Why is it that animals that use external fertilization, like frogs, will lay hundreds of eggs at once, while an animal like a hen, which uses internal fertilization, just lays one or maybe a few at a time?
The answer really comes down to managing risk. I mean, think about it. Those eggs fertilized out in the open water are incredibly vulnerable. They're exposed to predators, to strong currents, to all sorts of dangers. So these animals have to play a numbers game. By releasing hundreds or even thousands of eggs, they're making a bet that, against all those odds, at least a few will make it and survive to carry on the species.
But listen, fertilization is really just the starting gun. The truly incredible journey is what happens next, the transformation of that one single cell into a complex, living, breathing organism.
So that single zygote gets to work. It starts dividing, and fast. From one cell to two, then four, then eight, and on, until it forms this little ball of cells. This structure, which we now call an embryo, travels to the uterus and embeds itself in the wall, getting ready for the next long stage of development. And this brings us to another key difference in strategy. You have animals like humans and dogs who give birth to live young. They're called viviparous. And then you have animals that lay eggs, like hens and frogs. Those are oviparous. Both paths create new life, for sure, but the journey for the little one is completely different.
For many of those egg-laying animals, hatching is far from the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning of a totally radical transformation. It's a process called metamorphosis, where the young version of the animal looks and lives in a completely different way from its adult form.
And the classic example here, of course, is the frog. It starts its life as an egg in the water. Then it hatches into a fully aquatic larva called a tadpole, which, let's be honest, looks way more like a fish than a frog. But then, through metamorphosis, it loses its tail, it grows legs, its lungs develop, and it transforms into the adult frog that we all recognize. What a journey.
All right, so we've covered the first playbook. But what if you could just skip that whole process of finding a partner? Well, that is exactly what our second playbook, asexual reproduction, is all about. We're now shifting gears from the genetic lottery of two parents to the amazing efficiency of just one.
A great example of this is a little creature called the hydra. It reproduces by budding. See, a small outgrowth, or a bud, just starts to appear on the parent's body. This bud grows and develops into a tiny, genetically identical clone of its parent, and eventually it just pops off and starts a new life all on its own. Simple as that.
And with microscopic organisms like the amoeba, the process is even more direct. It's called binary fission. The single cell just copies its nucleus, splits right down the middle, and poof, where there was one, now there are two identical individuals. It's literally cloning in its most natural and efficient form. And that idea, the idea of creating a genetically identical copy, well, it's not just for amoebas, which brings us to one of the most famous and groundbreaking stories in all of modern biology, the story of Dolly the sheep, the very first mammal ever to be cloned from an adult cell. So, how did they do it? The whole process started with this sheep, a Finn Dorset ewe. Scientists took a regular body cell right from her mammary gland, and inside that one cell was her complete, entire genetic blueprint. Next, they took an unfertilized egg cell from a totally different sheep, a Scottish blackface ewe. And here's the mind-blowing part. They carefully removed the nucleus from that egg, basically wiping its genetic hard drive clean. Then, they inserted the nucleus from the Finn Dorset sheep into the empty egg. This newly engineered egg was then implanted into the Scottish blackface ewe, who acted as a surrogate mother. And the result? Dolly. She was born in 1996, and here's the key. She wasn't related to her birth mother at all. She was an exact genetic clone of that first sheep, the Finn Dorset, the one the nucleus came from.